All right, and we are live back on YouTube. For me, it feels like it's been a couple of weeks because it has been. Tim took over the reins from me as far as hosting, him and Ellie. So thank you to Ellie for doing the preview show last Wednesday and then doing the post game show as well against Kent State. I was at the game. Was talking to Tim about it a little bit before. Lucked out with weather. I feel like in the lead up to the game, it was every single day. It was like, it's gonna rain, it's not gonna rain, it's gonna rain, it's not gonna rain, and it ended up only really raining for like, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes during the first quarter. So, Tim, what were your thoughts? Just real quick, what were your thoughts on the Kent State Golden Flashes? Because man, I wrote about it in Random Thoughts today, but that very well might have been the worst team that Penn State has played during the James Franklin era. I mean, other than Idaho, I can't really think. Maybe like I feel like they played UMass in like 2014 or 2015, one of Franklin's first seasons.
Yeah,
But other than that, I can't
it's
think of.
right up there. I mean, I don't know if it's the word. I guess you'd have to. I had to think about that. You mentioned 2014 UMass. I think they beat him like 45 zip, and that was with Franklin's worst roster he had. I mean, that was pre Saquon Barkley. I mean, last year's UMass was pretty bad too. The one they beat 63 zip, Idaho. So I don't know where this one would rank. I'd have to really sit down and think about it. But they're definitely up there. When you put up, when you put up a record number of total yards while holding them to like 67 total yards, and the majority of those they got in garbage time after the game was well out of reach. And I think I believe their longest play from scrimmage. Actually, without looking it up, Pat, what do you think their longest play from scrimmage was? Kent State's.
Man, I mean, 8 yards maybe, or they had the pass that they got
You're
first
getting
down.
kind of warm. It was 13 yards.
Okay, it's probably the first time pass that I'm thinking of. That I think was in like the second quarter.
Yeah, I think their third. I think it was their second or third string quarterback doing that too, because I know their starter got knocked out.
Yeah,
third play of the game, and then their backup had I think it was. I don't even know if he got hit, but I think just unfortunate. Like his foot turned the wrong way, and I think he tore some ligaments.
It was an Achilles injury. Yeah, so the starter. It said that he had hip surgery, so that's obviously not great. And then the backup torn Achilles. So Kent State down to their third string quarterback, which not to get too far into this, but I talked a little bit about this in Random Thoughts. And I understand that like Toledo just beat Mississippi State like 2 weeks ago at Mississippi State, but we are kind of getting to the point with some of these like lower tier MAC teams going against like a Penn State or going against a Tennessee or going against the higher end SEC Big Ten teams where it's almost like not like healthy for them. Like it's just a generally smart thing to do. Like it's one thing in basketball or baseball to have a lower level team play against a higher level team just because it's not as physically taxing or physically demanding. Football, not necessarily the case. All of a sudden you have, I mean, kind of like you saw with, I know the second quarterback, it was seemingly non-contact, but I don't know, just I'm interested to see where we are 10 years from now. I mean, obviously just with college sports in general, but especially if we're going to have these, lower tier teams playing, Penn States and other higher tier Big Ten teams. That's something that ends up happening because there's just such a difference in the size and speed and athleticism of a Penn State versus a Kent State. But anywho, let's move on to this week. Enough about Kent State. We have a ranked matchup. Penn State taking on Illinois. Number 9 Penn State taking on number 19 Illinois. Illinois coming off that big win at Nebraska, which they were able to do on Friday night in Lincoln. So they come into this coming to Beaver Stadium ranked for the first time since 2008, which obviously great whiteout game for Penn State fans. Derek Williams goes off. One of the really good seasons for Penn State of this century. But we now come to this season. Last time Illinois came to Penn State, we don't have to talk about disgusting 9 overtime game. I was unfortunately there. I don't know about you, Tim, if you were at that game or not. I was.
Thankfully, I was not. But I did have to do I was doing post game. That was the first year I started doing post game shows like this for Mark Rogers' YouTube channel, and that
was that with you and Marty? Was that a Marty?
Actually, well, it was me and Marty, but Marty wasn't available, and then I don't think I was able to get Ellie on either. So I ended up getting Jared Slanina, our managing editor, who unfortunately, I believe that's his only experience ever doing these YouTube shows. So I don't know. Next time either one isn't available, maybe we can get him on for a win. You know?
Yeah, get that taste out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Anyway, it'll be a 7:30 kick on NBC. Heading into the season, I think the big discussion was if this was going to be the whiteout game or Washington was going to be the whiteout game, being that the Ohio State game is going to be a noon kickoff. Penn State ends up going with Washington, which in retrospect, probably should have just chose Illinois. I mean, not many people necessarily expected Illinois to beat Kansas and then to beat Nebraska and be ranked coming to this matchup. But regardless, we now have James Franklin and other Penn State players asking for whiteout energy. I don't know why. I mean, I understand from a marketing perspective why they can't just call it a whiteout, but it is very funny that even like the main Penn State football account is doing this whiteout energy thing when it's like, you can just tell the fans to wear white. You don't even have to say, oh, it's a whiteout. Just send it on a tweet, be like, wear white.
I saw Nick Dawkins was tweeting out wear white. I mean, it's no secret. This is a whiteout in all but official name only. I mean, that's what it's going to look like.
Which we have had a couple of these in the past. So I'm thinking back. I know like 2016 Iowa was a game that Franklin asked for one of these unofficial whiteouts. So it seems like we'll have that again. So yeah, it certainly will be a festive atmosphere in Beaver Stadium. Game that I wish I could go to, but man, those 7:30 kicks are. If you don't have a place to stay already, it's almost impossible to get to because otherwise you're not going to be making it home until 3 or 4 a.m. And at this point in my life, I'm not willing to commit to do that. So we'll be watching from the comfort of the couch. Penn State opened up as 17 or 18-point favorites. I probably should have looked up what it's at now.
It was 17 and a half last I saw.
Okay,
it.
So that is.
I don't know what it is at this moment. I guess we could take a quick.
Yeah, I think it depended upon where you saw, what book you were looking at. But Penn State opened up as relatively big favorites over another ranked team. But I think that's just kind of goes back.
Spread is up to 19 now.
Oh wow! So it's going in the other direction.
I'm surprised. I thought people would be throwing money on Illinois, considering how they've done so far. But
I know Penn State Twitter, as soon as 17 and a half came out, it was like put money on Illinois, at least to cover. I think generally speaking, I mean, we can get into predictions a little bit later on. We'll talk more about Illinois in the next couple of moments, but I think people certainly think Penn State will win, but could be closer than people think. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about Illinois. Tim, what worries you about this game? So going into the season, I think I just know from my perspective, this wasn't necessarily one of the games that I was worried about. I mentioned West Virginia, mentioned Wisconsin, mentioned USC. Illinois, not one of the original games I was worried about. Certainly now they bring up a little bit more worry, being that they are a ranked team and have some good wins, beat a solid-esque Kansas squad and beat a decent Nebraska squad as well, especially going on the road on Friday night and halting some of that momentum. So what are some things that worry you about Illinois and things that could cause Penn State some problems?
Well, I think the biggest thing you see is how much improved their quarterback Luke Altmaier has been this year. I mean, he's last year he threw 4 interceptions against Penn State. This year so far, he's thrown 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So thus far, it's been a lot better for Altmaier. He's kind of looked more like the quarterback they were hoping he would be when he transferred from Ole Miss last season. Maybe just took him a year to get used to how their offensive coordinator, Barry Lenny Jr., runs things. But whatever it is, he looks a lot better as a passer. Pretty good runner in his own. I think it's that, they got a couple good receivers at their disposal. Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. Bryant leads the team in 309 yards, 6 touchdowns. Zachary Franklin doesn't have any touchdowns yet, but he also he leads the team in receptions. He has 21 of them, 243 yards. So those are 2 big targets in the passing attack that the secondary will have to account for. So they got some weapons. Of course, the run game, they haven't been quite as explosive in the run game, but they like to rotate between several guys. Most notably Caden Fegan, who's 6'3", 250-pound behemoth. He's
I got some big boys at running back.
yeah, he's got him. Got Khalil Valentine, Aiden Lowry, Josh McCray, who actually played some in the last time Illinois played at Beaver Stadium. So this won't be his first rodeo in Happy Valley. But they've got some. I think their thing is though they are a team that relies more so on the pass, but if they're able to have success through the air, then this is kind of what they did to Nebraska last year. I watched this game, but they had success on throwing, and then later in the game, they were able to really get their run game going as they were wearing down Nebraska's defense. So, obviously, I do think this Penn State team is just more deeper and talented compared to Nebraska, but the concern is, if they're able to get in their rhythm offensively early on, especially the passing game, they can use that to help set up, Caden Fegan, whoever's carrying the rock, to eventually start picking up some chunks in the ground too. But I would imagine Tom Allen's probably coming up with ways to stymie that passing attack, maybe to try to dial up some pressure on a Altmaier, or come up with some coverage schemes that'll kind of negate their top receiving targets, and maybe force Altmaier to have to check down to another target, or take matters into his own hands.
Sorry, I think the key, and you kind of hit the nail on the head with talking about the wide receivers. I think the key for Penn State, well, obviously it's twofold, but one, Pat Bryant is a very, very good wide receiver, 6'3", 200 pounds, big kid, can win those 50-50 balls. I think it's going to be really important for Penn State to make sure that there's help over the top for him. You don't want to put him on an island with a corner as good as, AJ Harris has been, and the corner play beyond AJ Harris has been a little up and down, but I want to make sure that Zakee Wheatley's over there to help on, go routes and things like that. Just simply because, despite the fact that it's a Brett Bielema team, they kind of are built from the outside in. You go back to that 2021 game we talked about, the running back McCray, who had like 140 yards as a freshman. Yeah. Chase Brown was on that team as well, also ran for a bajillion yards, but there's like still the screen grabs of that game of Penn State and like their nickel formation with Illinois, like in like a goal line formation.
Don't expect them to line up 8 offensive linemen and just, run at you.
No, doesn't expect like that'll be the case this week. A lot of Pat Bryant outright. You mentioned Sakari Franklin. I just want to make sure I have his name right. Sakari Franklin, who started at UTSA, was on some of those really good Roadrunner teams. Transferred to Ole Miss last year. Things just didn't kind of work out. I believe he battled some injuries as well, so he makes his way up to Illinois and has been quite good for the Illini, even though he hasn't found the end zone yet. So I think for Penn State, the season is obviously still young, with only having played West Virginia and Bowling Green and Kent State. But this is, I think, far and away the best group of pass catchers that Penn State has played. And despite the fact that Bowling Green, they played Texas A&M pretty well as well. I think, overall, just the best offense that Penn State will play to this point. One major thing, and you mentioned what's Tom Allen going to be scheming up? I think the biggest point for Penn State this week, other than shut down the wide receivers, is that Illinois is 11th in the Big Ten in sacks allowed, and they're 15th in tackles for loss allowed. So they're giving up sacks, they're giving up negative plays. Penn State needs to take advantage of that. And if you look at the stats from Penn State side of things, it's not great because they're not generating a ton of sacks. I want to say they're last in the Big Ten, or pretty close to last in the Big Ten, and they're 10th in tackles for loss. So it's kind of I don't want to say a weakness for Penn State, just because you have Abdul Carter, you have Denai Denison, you have the defensive tackles that they have, and they've been holding up against the run pretty well.
So the case I've seen people make, not to interrupt, but for the lack of sacks is because opposing quarterbacks they played so far, just Bowling Green comes to mind. They were all about just like quick drop back and it's quick, like 2 seconds, get rid of the ball, which that's 2 seconds is not enough time for any D lineman, no matter how stout they are, to bully an offensive lineman and make their way to the quarterback. So we'll see if Illinois gets they're taking a little more time to try to throw. That might give more of a window of opportunity for Abdul Carter or Zane Denied Dennis Sutton to make something happen. But yeah, that's kind of that could be a reason why sacks haven't been so great. And hopefully maybe that'll change on Saturday.
Yeah, and I know once again I don't have the tweet up, but I know that like Penn State's pressure rate, which I'm not like the biggest fan of some of the pressure analytics versus sacks, just because yes, pressure is really important, but actually getting to the quarterback is honestly just as important, if not more important. But I know, Penn State ranks up pretty highly in creating pressure. They're just not getting the sacks. And you like to think, and I do think that'll, eventually come around. I don't think that Abdul Carter and Denied Dennis Sutton are going to end up with, their hefty sack totals. I do think that for Penn State, and, we mentioned like what can Tom Allen do differently. I think schematically, one of the things that he can do is not allowed, to be dink and dunked, which so far, like, he has. I know one of our discussions, and I don't know if you saw in the BSD Slack, was kind of difference between Manny Diaz creating, chaos and creating turnovers and sacks and tackles for loss versus what Allen's been doing, which is a little bit more, allowing the dink and dunks. Like, even saw West Virginia had success moving the ball, but Penn State was able to clamp up in the red zone. They were able to get some fourth down stops. Obviously, the Bowling Green game was kind of just a mess in general, but
for one half at least.
Yeah. And you don't know how much you can really take from Kent State, which is, I don't know about for you, but everything I've been writing this week, it's like the Kent State game. Like, I don't know who, like.
But you know what? The one thing I will say about Kent State, Pat, is that Penn State did what really good teams should do to a really bad team like Kent State. As I'm so much about this, what's on the scoreboard. I know people were. I know there was like some meltdown from the fan base on the comments and message boards when it was only 7-0 midway for the second quarter. But even up to that point, Penn State had been moving the football on them. It's not like they weren't able to move the chains. They just really that Bo Prabula interception on the first drive of the game, which, I was not the time or place, but to be doing that stuff. But if that was looking like a drive was going to end in a touchdown. So if that ends in a touchdown, it's 14-0. Maybe the second quarter. I don't think there's as much complaining going on at that point. But I think the point is like they were moving the ball. I didn't, and defensively they were just shutting them down, which you should be doing to a almost punchless offense like Kent State's. So that's the thing. I didn't see any like real red flags pop out from that game, or so that they did what great teams should do, blow those guys out.
No, and weirdly enough, this isn't like an apples for apples comparison, but I almost do kind of look like this. I look at this game similar to how we looked at Penn State going to the Iowa game last year. Similar set of circumstances as far as primetime kickoff, kind of early in the season. Penn State has been a little hot and go. I think last year there was maybe slightly higher expectations, but they also had their struggles against, oddly enough, Illinois. It was a game that, Drew wasn't super efficient in, and Penn State couldn't quite pull away. And it was, I think for me, one of the first signs where it's like, oh, this whole like not generating big plays thing is like, it might be an actual issue. It's just funny that this go around, much more the question is on the defense as opposed to the offense, I think. And we can talk about Illinois' defense here in a second, but I think people believe that Penn State will be able to move the ball. It's a matter of what exactly we're expecting defensively. Will Pat Bryant and Sakari Franklin be able to get open and cause havoc, or will Penn State be able to clamp down and finally generate not just pressures but generate those sacks as well? So I think the interesting thing with Illinois is like compared to last season, Luke Altmaier, like we talked about before, is playing so much better. Penn State, was it 3 interceptions or 4 interceptions last year that he through against Penn State? And
I believe it was 4.
Okay,
at least what I've been hearing on the college football preview shows I was watching. I haven't looked it up for myself.
Either way, right? So Penn State was generating turnovers last year. against Altmaier, and is that going to be the case this year? Does he revert back to his play last season, or is he able to keep up with what he's been doing this season? Which, I mean, Nebraska's a solid defensive team, and he's coming off a really fantastic game, 21 of 27 for 215 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and weirdly, in a way, like some of the things that we were saying about Garrett Green, as far as like just being like an annoying, pestering like quarterback, I think you can kind of say about Altmaier. He's certainly not the athlete that Green is, but you'll see him on a 3rd and 4 take a rollout and take those yards. So, I just feel like a Brett Bielema team offensively, even though it is a little bit different than the type of teams that we've seen with him in the past, is going to generally be pretty smart of, hopefully not, well, for Illinois' case, not turning the ball over and taking what they can. I think, Altmaier getting out of the pocket and taking the yards when he has the chance will be important. So
obviously it comes down to how who can dictate things more, like, can Tom Allen dictate what Illinois is going to do, or will Barry Lunny Jr. dictate what their offense will do to Penn State's defense? Because last year, I mean, clearly Manny Diaz was dictating what Illinois' offense is able to do. I mean, they were able to shut down the run game. Not that they don't have much of a run game, but they kept that in check, and then they were able to just key in on Altmaier and just bait him in, get pressure on him, just make him make some poor decisions, which led to those turnovers. So we'll see. I mean, Allen obviously he's not Manny Diaz. He's not going to come, blitzing at you on most downs, but I'm sure he'll come up with some ways maybe to try and maybe bait Altmaier into making what ends up being a bad decision.
Yeah, and I think that's like an important piece for Penn State, just kind of once again going back to last year and comparing it to last year, where Penn State had these games against Illinois and Iowa and Northwestern. And one of the things that I know I wanted to see was, okay, Penn State, 9 times out of 10 probably wins those games, but how are you going to win them? And for last year, it was about, getting those explosive plays, showing that you can win that way. Again, it's great grand when you can get 4 yards every single play and pick up first downs on 3rd down, but can you generate those big plays? Because when you play against Michigan or Ohio State, just going back to last year, you're going to need to do it. So kind of looking at that in the inverse this year, defensively, yes, can they kind of do what they've been doing as far as, not being as aggressive, not generating sacks and turnovers and stuff like that? Can you win that way? Sure. But I think that if you're Penn State, you want to show the piece that you can generate, that Abdul Carter can have 2 sacks, that Jalen Reed can have an interception, that AJ Harris can have an interception, that you can play press coverage and not everything has to be, drop back in zone and give them 4 yards until they, cross the 40-yard line. So that's kind of like what I'm looking for in a game that Penn State's going to be favored, like we're saying, by if it's up to like 19.5 or whatever it's at. How they look, I think it's more important than like the end result in a lot of ways, just for where Penn State wants to go. But let's make the move from Penn State's offense, or rather Penn State's defense, to talking about Penn State's offense. Oh, hello, Lando. Thanks for joining, Lando. Glad to be back. Let's talk about Illinois' defense going against Penn State's offense. So kind of give us the rundown on, either what Penn State's offense might be looking to do, or what challenges Illinois' defense might be looking to do to Penn State's offense.
Well, the biggest just from I've watched some other shows, podcasts where they brought in this Illinois writer. His name's Jeremy Warner. He works for the Illinois 24/7 site, but he had some interesting insight. The secondary is easily the best part of their defense. They've garnered at this point 7 interceptions in the first 3 games.
First in the Big Ten in interceptions.
Yep. So they now, I mean, still that's pretty. You can say what you want about, maybe Kansas isn't all that good, or Nebraska's overrated. Whatever. I don't care. 7 interceptions in 4 games is pretty good. So they definitely going to have to. Drew's going to have to, be smart with throwing the ball, which that was never really a concern of him. I mean, the real concern was just he was a check down Charlie last season, but this year he's
37 career touchdowns to 3 interceptions, which is, for
yeah.
not to delve off into a Drew discussion, but just real quickly, like it is very funny in, going into the season that some people, mostly non-Penn Staters, I think most Penn Staters had faith in him. But there were some, questions about if he was or isn't a good quarterback. And I'm not saying that Drew, once again, is not like Heisman caliber guy, but he's very clearly like a good college quarterback. But anyway, continue on, Tim. I didn't mean to
so
talk about baby Drew too much.
Yeah, so the key is just Drew's got to make good decisions, and I'm not worried about him making poor decisions in this one. He knows when to throw or when to just tuck and run, which, I mean, that's, you and I have talked about this probably ad nauseum at this point, but that's one area he's really improved in, just being more decisive on when to just take off and run. And also he just looks a lot more lighter and nimble on his feet than he did a year ago. And that's, from, he shed some of that baby fat off of him and just looks like a leaner quarterback overall. So I think you might see, I'll tell you what, if Illinois doesn't put a spy on Drew, I could see him having a decent night on the ground. If Illinois is going to focus so much on trying to take away Tyler Warren or, Amari Evans or, Trey Wallace, that opens up things, not just for like Nick Singleton to get loose in the passing game, but also could open up things for Drew Allar's feet. If they're not going to put a spy on him, they're going to focus on keeping the receivers in check. So, and also, speaking of running, that kind of brings my next point. So the weaker part of this Illinois defense is their front seven, and I think this is where Penn State can have a good night with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen running at that defense. So I think they're, at this point, I've got full trust in Andy Kotelnicki. The offense just seems to be clicking more and more of each passing game, and I don't think this one's going to be much different. Obviously, this will be the best secondary they're going to go up against so far. So, we'll see if they're able to generate another interception there. But I think I trust Kotelnicki will scheme some guys open and give Drew some easy targets to throw to. The real key, I think the key here is going to be pace. I think maybe you mentioned it a few minutes ago, but who can dictate the pace of this game? Because Illinois, I mean, even though we said, yeah, this is not your typical Brett Bielema team that just likes to pound the rock at you. They kind of more throw to set up the run, but despite that, they're still a team that plays they're going to want to play at a more like deliberate kind of pace.
Big
Whereas
Ten
Penn State being explosive on off, they want, if you're Penn State, you want this game to be a track meet. Like you want to, because I don't think Illinois is a team that's going to reach the 30s in scoring. Like if Penn State can get above 30 points, like I think that's a game they ought to win. No question in my mind. So I think they're going to try to turn this game into a track meet if they can. Illinois is going to try to make them, dink and dunk their way downfield. But we'll see if what Kotelnicki can try to dial up something that can get them, like a 40 or 50-yard touchdown play, or at least sets up a touchdown for them. So things like that. You want to. I think the key is going to be, Penn State just quicker scoring drives, just piling up the points, not allowing, they can't allow this game to turn into a rock fight. If it turns into a rock fight, that's an advantage to Illinois.
Yeah, I think, and we can say this about like any game, obviously, but a major key for Penn State, and you kind of touched on it, is not turning the ball over, which I know is like, no kidding, like Captain point out the obvious, but like we were talking about, they're first in the Big Ten in interceptions. They're second in fumbles recovered with 3, but they have caused 8 fumbles, which is pretty crazy that they've only recovered, generally, if you, force 8 fumbles, you would think that you're going to recover more than 3. So
I didn't realize it was that low. I thought they
yeah,
had a little more luck. Like, I guess, what was it? Was it West Virginia or Bowling Green? I don't know who they were forcing all those fumbles against and didn't pounce on it, but
yeah. Can't think off the top of my head, but either way, so they're obviously good at forcing turnover. A big important point, I'm sure, this week going into the whiteout, more likely, or the whiteout energy, more likely than not, if Illinois wins, they're going to need to win that turnover battle. What I will say in Illinois' defense is that, right, you look at the stats, so they lead the Big Ten in interceptions, and they're causing all these fumbles, even if they're not recovering all of them. They actually lost the turnover battle against Nebraska. So they lost 2 fumbles and they only caused 1 interception. So they've shown that they're able to win in different ways. I mean, Altmaier was really, really good last week with just keeping Illinois on pace and picking up first downs and converting on third downs when they needed to. Their running game, Fagan had 5.8 yards per carry, McCray 4.2. Some of the other guys, higher up there as well. So I think Illinois, kind of like almost what you were saying before, where Penn State wants to make this a track meet, whereas Illinois, I think, wants to slow the game down and keep it a one possession game at all times. I just know from watching that Nebraska game on Friday, it always felt like, and granted, it could have been the atmosphere, but it always felt like Nebraska was always just a player or two away from, I wouldn't say blowing it open, but kind of securing that win. And they just
taking a multiple score lead, which
yeah,
in that kind of environment, a game like that, if you're the home team and you get a multiple score lead on a team, it's usually a good thing for you.
Yeah, they just really never were able to. So I think for Penn State, right, Drew, don't turn the ball over. Certainly don't. I still want to see him take those shots deep, like we've seen every single game to Amari Evans. They're always making sure to get him the ball. See if you can obviously scheme open Tyler Warren. He's quickly moving up. Like we've had a lot of good tight ends the past, just during the James Franklin era, from Jasecki to Pat Farleymuth to Brenton Strange, even Theo Johnson. I'm very curious to see where Tyler Warren ends up on that. Just the fan Mount Rushmore of tight ends at Penn State, because he's been really, really fantastic, and hopefully that continues as the competition gets tougher. But I think for Penn State, so yes, don't turn the ball over. Drew has to be smart with the ball and not give Illinois short fields. Like you said, I think that there's going to be the chance that Penn State is going to be able to run on Illinois. If you look at the box score, it shows last week that Nebraska only averaged 1.6 yards per carry, but a lot of that was based on Dylan Raiola just taking some really, really long sacks, especially in overtime. Because if you take away Raiola's rushing yards, Nebraska ran for 102 yards on 25 carries. That's for about a little over 4 yards per carry, which
he had his freshman moments at the worst possible time in that overtime period, taking those sacks. Like, he just needed to get rid of the ball.
Yeah. So I think if you're Penn State, the opportunity will be there to run the ball. And what we've seen out of this Penn State offensive line so far. I mean, West Virginia was a little hot and go. They were able to finally get Nick Singleton going with some big plays. But I think that'll be a key point is to obviously get Singleton and Kaytron Allen the ball in opportune circumstances. And like we were saying before, Illinois kind of is probably going to work their way outside in. I think for Penn State, a really good sign for the future will be if that they can establish the run and work from inside out. So Kotelnicki does have some experience against this Illinois crew. I know it's a different Illinois team this year.
Good point you're making there.
Yeah, Kansas did play Illinois last year. It was in it was at Kansas, but Kansas put up 539 total yards, 262 rushing yards, 277 passing yards. So just a really dominant display from Kotelnicki. And actually, it was one of the first games, not to make it all about me, but it was one of the first games where I was like, this Kotelnicki guy, let me just write his name down for potential offensive coordinators. So impressive stuff. Just like we saw against West Virginia, it was a team that he was familiar with, having played a couple times before at Kansas, and now playing another team that he played at Kansas before. So I'm sure he will be ready to go, which is a weird feeling, Tim. Kind of, I know you're a little bit older than me, but the idea that we have more faith, I'm not saying we don't have any faith in Tom Allen defense, because I certainly do, but more faith in the offense than then the defense is a little bit change of pace, but slightly welcomed at least.
Well, it's to add further to this, Pat. They're going to be honoring members of the 1994 undefeated team. It's 30-year anniversary of that season, so they're going to be doing that too. So hopefully, get some 94 juju and going in there. Maybe they put up like 50, 60 points.
Like people always mention like Penn State and like rivalries. I mean, obviously, like the fake Michigan State rivalry. When Penn State plays Iowa, it's always brought up how many good games that Penn State and Iowa has played. Penn State, Illinois is low-key like a pretty interesting I don't know if like the term.
Well, heck, you want to talk Penn State? I mean, 94. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, watching them go down 21-0 and then just watching that incredible comeback over the course of the game. And, Brian Milt plunging into the end zone with, in the final minute to cap off a 96-yard drive. That's like a good childhood memory of mine.
But you have 94. You have, I guess 2008 is like not that big of a deal, but in 2007, I think it was right. 2007 they lose to Illinois, and then 2008
they lost to Illinois. 2008 they got their revenge in the whiteouts.
So that's on a lower scale. You then obviously have 2011, which was weirdly enough like Joe Paterno's last game, and was just one of the weirdest Penn State games that you can ever think of. Not even knowing what was coming in the following days and weeks.
It was like a forgettable 3 quarters, and then you had a wild finish.
Derek Moy, who had like a broken
foot, comes in as an emergency like situation. He wasn't going to play because of his foot, but the offense wasn't doing anything, and they needed a touchdown. So he comes in, and lo and behold, he makes a couple clutch grabs. Silas Red punched it in, and then their kicker, who was, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but Illinois' kicker was perfect. He was like 10 for 10 on this, something like that. Like he was, so he's got a straight shot. It's like, I know it's 40 yards, but still a straight shot. Guy's been perfect. Somehow doinks it on the right upright. Just wild finish.
98 also Illinois is where we got the lower leap. But even after 2011, then I mean, you just have the Tim Beckman 2012 trying to recruit all the Penn State players, like that whole thing. Obviously, then an overtime game will live in Penn State lore. So once again, I don't think there's much hate or anything between Penn State and Illinois, but just weirdly interesting connections when you go back through the years and think about some important moments in Penn State lore. And oddly enough, Illinois sometimes finds themselves on the other side of that. So anyway, getting back to this year, Tim, we have score predictions coming out later this week, but I'm going to put you on the spot now. I don't know if you made your prediction or not, but I'm putting you on the spot. What do you think happens?
So I think the teams I could see them trading blows early on. It could look similarly to how the 2008 game did. I mean, Illinois, they struck first. Penn State responded. Illinois scored again. Penn State responded, but then the defense tightened up, and then the offense kept scoring a little more, and eventually they ended up winning by 2 touchdowns. I think I see something similar playing out. Like I think they'll trade scores early on, but I just go back. I just have the utmost faith that that offense is going to do what they need to do. They'll dictate the pace of the game. They will put up enough points. They'll have multi-score lead at some point. They'll be able to just, in the defense, just kind of be able to pin their ears back and force Illinois to take some bigger risks and not allowed to get into a rock fight. I mean, and of course you throw in the white out energy, whatever the hell that means. Shout out Brett Bielema. I know it's actually not nowhere near as malicious as some people are making it out to be, but that is a soundbite that's, I'm sure, made its way over to the Lash buildings.
Also, it's just funny.
Just to the student section. So, I mean, I don't think Illinois is going to be intimidated, but I'm telling you, man, it is going to be freaking loud. I won't be surprised if they have to burn a timeout because Luke Altmaier can't hear what his coordinator's telling him for the headsets. So shades of 2019 Michigan white out there. So, but my score prediction, I'm going to say Penn State covers in the end, 38-17.
All right, I have Penn State 35, Illinois 20. So I do have the Illini covering. I think that it's just going to be like every Penn State game, in my opinion, just like an annoying game. One that I would love if it was like last year's Iowa game where Penn State pulls away and really just kind of clowns them. But I think Illinois is kind of like what we were talking about before, just going to be good enough to keep it close. Bielema is like, a very solid coach, kind of like Greg Schiano-esque, where he can kind of just, find a way to 7-5, records every year. So yeah, certainly don't think like Penn State's ever going to be greatly concerned in this one. Like I'm not expecting like Illinois to go up like 13-3 at some point, but I do think that they keep it close, maybe have a turnover here or there to stay in the game and eventually cover. So what was I don't know why I'm blanking. What was the whiteout game last year? Why can't I think of what the whiteout?
It was Iowa. That was a 31
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So I was going to say this is the first whiteout game at night versus a ranked opponent, but I think Iowa was ranked last year.
Well, I guess not officially, but it's
yeah.
whiteout energy at night against a ranked opponent. I think Iowa was ranked last year when they came to
yeah, they were 24. I'm looking at it right
now.
now.
So there was last year they year ago they were hosting. I think it was around this time they were hosting Iowa for the whiteout. Yeah. They ended up it was like 10-0 at halftime, but the way the defense was holding them in check, you kind of got the feeling that one more touchdown would effectively put Iowa away. Like you never thought Iowa was capable of getting multiple touchdowns without the defense helping them out or special teams.
Yeah. I like that I was literally just talking about the Iowa game and I was like, what was the whiteout last year? My brain is mush. I don't know if it's the smartest idea for us to do YouTube shows at 8:00 in the middle of the work week, because I get to this point in the week and I'm like, oh, I am losing it. But
this is what it's like when we both have day jobs. So
yes, sadly, once eventually BSD will finally wise up and just make us full-time Penn State blog boys. But until then, it'll stay at 8:00. Anything else? Penn State, Illinois. I think we hit everything. Penn State.
What was this? What was I say? Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We're currently at 73 subscribers. I see 60 would turned in tonight, which for a Wednesday night preview show, I think is pretty good, especially because we're pretty, this show itself is in its infancy. But if you haven't done so yet, please head over to our channel and subscribe. You get notifications when we have a new live show coming up. Of course, we'll be going live. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers, so Patrick will maybe do a show shirtless or do something crazy of his choosing.
What are we at? I think we're at 73. Did you say
73 when last I saw it? Maybe it's ticked up a little since.
Yeah, we got to get those subscribers up. We hit 50 in the first 3 days, so not yelling at our viewers. We love you all, but
we got a good readership base, I know, in the site. So I know we got some more potential YouTube subscribers here. And we post these shows on BSD's page as well. So, but yeah, so if you haven't done so, please subscribe. Also, we'll be Saturday night, probably close to 11:30. Maybe we just say 11:30. We'll do the post-game show. Hopefully this game doesn't. I'm assuming this game, please, all knocking on the wood, doesn't go to overtime. So we should be able to start and finish before it's way too late.
I'm looking at the weather now, by the way, and no, it looks like we'll be okay. There's just a 20% chance of precipitation the entire day in State College, so looks like we'll be good from that perspective as well. But you never know this time of the year. All right, well, Tim, thank you as always, and like Tim just said, make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel. Once again, we go live every Wednesday at 8 to preview the upcoming game, and then we go live. Basically, I mean, I want to say we're pretty good with being in with 5 minutes of the final whistle of going live on YouTube post game wise. So always going live post game, always going live on Wednesdays to preview the shows. make sure that you are reading our stuff at blackshoediaries.com. The more stuff that you read, the more time you click on the site, the more views we get, and the more views we get, maybe BSD will give us full-time jobs. So make sure you continue to do that. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for subscribing. And we will see you on Saturday, maybe early Sunday morning. We'll see how long this game goes for the recap against Illinois.